Hi everyone, and welcome to the PPP Loan Frequently Asked Questions Part 1. And the reason why it's Part 1 is because there's probably going to have to be a Part 2 and a Part 3 and even possibly a Part 4. And the reason for this is because of clarifications that are constantly coming out around the PPP loan as well as the PPP loan forgiveness. Now, the reason why clarification is needed is because, as you know, Congress writes the law. And it's not always clear when they write the law of what their intent was. So therefore, banks and even CPAs and enrolled agents and other accountants normally interpret the law based upon what they think Congress meant. And that's the reason why clarification is sometimes needed. So the information that I'm providing today is based upon what we believe Congress intended when they wrote the portion of forgiveness for PPP loan. So if there are any clarifications or any adjustments that I need to make based upon what I'm telling you or what I'm sharing with you today, I'm going to come back and make those clarifications and those adjustments. So the first thing you need to know is that, of course, the PPP loan is a forgivable loan. Now, because the process of providing these loans and also the forgiveness portion of it are in the hands of the banks, it's very important that you contact the bank that gave you the loan to find out what type of paperwork they're going to need when it's time for forgiveness. Because you don't want to wait until the last minute to start to gather everything that is needed for you to show in order for you to get forgiveness. It's something you want to start right away. So the minute you start spending that money, you want to make sure that you are tracking things in a way that your bank would need to see for forgiveness purposes. Okay, so question number 1 is, can I pay subcontractors with my PPP loan and still get forgiveness? And the answer to that question is no, you cannot pay subcontractors with your loan and still get forgiveness. If you are a business or you're a salon that has actual employees, you have to spend the payroll on your employees and not on your subcontractors. So what are some of the things that you have to take into consideration when you are spending money on payroll? Okay, so one of the things that we've been hearing is that you have to spend 75% of the loan on payroll and then 25% of that loan on other, which are the other items, which would include mortgage interest, utilities, and also rent. But in all actuality, it's not necessarily a straight down the line 75-25. What the law says is you have to spend up to 75% of the loan on payroll and no more than 25% of the loan on other items. So what this means, and if we interpret that, what that means is you can spend 80, 85, 90, and 100% on payroll, okay? Because it says up to 75. It doesn't say it has to be exactly 75. But keep in mind that if you spend the entire amount on payroll, then of course you have nothing left for other items. On the other hand, if you spent, let's say, 80% of the loan on payroll, then you can spend 20% on other costs. You cannot spend 30, I shouldn't say you cannot, but if you do spend, let's say, 30% on other non-payroll costs, and then you spend only 70% on payroll costs, then that, of course, means that a percentage of that loan will not be forgiven, okay? So keep in mind that you are not stuck having to spend only 75% on payroll. You can spend more than 75% on payroll. Okay, you just can't spend less than 75% on payroll if you want to be forgiven. Now, keep in mind that if you don't go according to, or rather, if you don't spend the funds according to what is required and you have to pay anything back, then of course, you'll be paying back a loan based on a 1% interest rate, which is not that bad. But the whole idea for most businesses, and especially with my clients, the whole idea is that they want to get 100% of their loan forgiven, or at least they want to attempt to get 100% of their loan forgiven. And in that case, you do have to follow the requirements of spending that money, okay? So what are some of the things that you have to take into consideration for loan forgiveness? So I'm going to run down 4 items. the employee headcount has got to remain the same. So what does this mean? This means that if you had 50 employees when you applied for the PPP loan, you also have to have 50 employees when you're applying for forgiveness. Okay, so that means the headcount has to stay the same, whether it's full-time employees or whether it's part-time employees. The headcount will have to stay the same. Now, there is one minor exception to that. There is a provision for employers who call back employees who refuse to come back to work. So if you have an employee that refuses to come back to work, and that particular employee was part of your loan calculation, then there is a provision that the SBA is coming out with that will state that that portion of the loan will still be forgivable. Okay, so that's something that I'll probably talk about during a part 2 or part 3 of the frequently asked questions, because we are still trying to get complete clarification on that one. Okay, so another thing you have to make sure is that you do not decrease your employees' wages or salary by more than 25%. So which means if you are paying your employee $100, you cannot pay them less than $75. So if you reduce their salary or their wages by more than 25%, then there is a portion of your PPP loan that will not be forgiven. So I can't give you the actual calculation as to how much of it will not be forgiven because I don't know that. But just keep in mind that if you do reduce your employee pay by more than 25%, that there is a portion of that loan that will not be forgiven. Also, in addition to that, if you made any changes to your employee headcount or your employee salary, how much you were paying them between February 15th, 2020 and April 26th, 2020, you are going to be required to restore your employee headcount and also to restore your employee salaries to what they were by no later than June 30th, 2020. So these are some of the items that you're going to have to take into consideration as you navigate your way through the loan forgiveness program. Another expense that you can pay in order to get loan forgiveness is rent. So that one is pretty simple. Rent is what it is, it's rent. If you are a booth renter, then the rent that you pay to your landlord is also considered rent for you, and therefore it can also be forgiveness. So basically, rent that you pay on your building, if you are renting a salon, rent that you pay on your salon suite if you are a salon suite renter, and then rent that a booth renter pays to their landlord if you are a booth renter. All of those are forgivable expenses. And then there are utilities. So for loan forgiveness purposes, utilities are considered electric, gas, water, telephone, and internet. And then there is something on the end of that that says ETC. So ETC means etc., 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 which means that there's possibly additional items that they may add to utilities. So for right now, we have these 5 items, or rather these 5 utilities that I mentioned, but that may expand over time. So of course, when I come back to do a part 2 or a part 3 of frequently asked questions, then I will let you know if anything has been added to the utilities for loan forgiveness purposes. And then there's the final one, mortgage interest. Now, one of the questions that I get around this particular forgivable item is, what is considered a mortgage? So a mortgage under these circumstances, as related to the PPP loan forgiveness, is anything that any asset, any business asset that you own that is being secured by a loan. For example, let's say you own the building that your salon is located in. Well, that means that you will be paying the mortgage for the building, and the interest portion of that is what is forgivable. For example, if your total note is $1,000 and $200 of that is considered interest, that means that the $200 out of the $1,000 is forgivable. So the principal portion, which would be, or rather the principal and the taxes and insurance, which will accumulate to $800, is not forgivable. Only the interest portion of the entire payment is forgivable. Also, mortgage can also be considered any item, as I said, any item that you have a loan on that is secured by a business asset. So if you have a salon full of furniture, okay, and you have a loan on all of that furniture, and that loan is being secured by the assets, meaning that if you don't pay the loan, that means that the finance company or whoever owns those assets can come take them from you. That's what's considered under these circumstances as a mortgage. So that means the interest that you are paying on your furniture is also forgiven. So if you're paying $500 a month on your salon equipment, and out of that $500, $100 of that is considered interest, well, that is forgivable under the PPP loan. So that is what is considered mortgage interest. Any business asset that is being secured by a loan. Forgivable mortgage interest does not include interest that you are paying on, say, a line of credit. Or if you just have a regular loan out for the business and you're paying interest on that loan, it is not necessarily forgivable because the loan that you have out for your business may not be secured by a business asset. So under those circumstances, the interest that you're paying for those types of loan are not part of what is forgiven under the PPP loan forgiveness program. Now, I want you to keep in mind that all of these expenses that are considered forgivable have to have been expenses that you were paying prior to February 15th, 2020. So in other words, more than likely, all of these expenses already exist on your 2019 tax return as an expense. That is one of the criteria. They have to have existed as an expense in a prior on a prior tax return. But more important, they have to have existed before February 15th, 2020. You can't have created an expense after the fact. So for example, let's say in your salon, there was no landline, but then you decided on March 20th to put a landline in your salon. That would mean that that particular expense, so your phone bill, will not be part of what is forgiven as part of the PPP loan forgiveness program. So keep in mind, the expense has to have been in existence prior to COVID-19. Otherwise, it is not one of the expenses that will be forgiven during the PPP loan forgiveness process. So I realize that this video is really geared towards salons that have employees. So I'm going to make a separate video for booth renters and for Schedule C filers, because the way that the loan forgiveness works for Schedule C filers is a little bit different from the way that it works for salons that have employees. And I'll be back as updates occur for the PPP loan forgiveness.